Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Monday, June 23rd, 2025. This podcast is just going to be a recap of the NBA and Stanley Cup Finals and what's next for each league, and maybe we'll do a quick look at the baseball standings before we exit the show. We'll start at the NBA Finals. The Oklahoma City Thunder are your 2024-25 NBA champions. They're the best team all season. They had the league MVP and the leading scorer of the league, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is your rightful finals MVP, despite his 8 for 27 game from a shooting standpoint in Game 7. This is a well-deserving team. They're here to stay. This should be the first of many titles for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they're going to be the next Golden State. They're going to be the it team, the dominant team. And all the ramifications to where the Thunder, or who the Thunder become right now, we'll get into that later because there's more to talk about, obviously, with this finals. But unfortunately, the finals are going to be remembered not for the winner, it's for the runner-up because of how they got there, the Indiana Pacers, with all those crazy finishes they had and every game, including in Game 1 of this series. And you can make a case if Halliburton doesn't get hurt, that's a closer game. Oklahoma City probably still wins, but that's probably like a 2 or a 1 possession game that comes down to the final minute if he doesn't tear his Achilles. And that's just absolutely brutal that he's going to be out for next year too. And now the East just got a whole lot weaker with that injury piled on top of Jason Tatum's injury from last month against the Knicks. So, and the Thunder, the West is going to be better, but Memphis obviously trades Desmond Bane to Orlando, and they get worse, but who knows, maybe they use that draft capital Orlando gave them to get somebody else. So that's obviously this year's Mikal Bridges trade so far in terms of a not a star but a little bit better than a role player getting traded kind of thing with Bane. But yeah, the Thunder real quick. I'm going to go over the box score of the game. I mentioned SGA had 29 points, but 8 for 27 shooting. Jalen Williams had 27 for 20 shooting. Chet Holmgren, 18, 6 of 8 shooting. He was the best one of the big three, arguably, in that game from a statistical standpoint, although Shai was obviously the best guy on the court. And then Alex Caruso and Casey Wallace each had 10 points off the bench. On the flip side, Tyrese Halliburton looked really good in the game before he tore his Achilles, and obviously, he got injured in Game 5. They play him in Game 6 and was kind of quiet in spite of the Pacers winning Game 6. But before he got hurt, 9 points, all three-pointers, and then he gets hurt in the first quarter of the game. Andrew Nembhard played really well. Siakam was quiet by his standards, especially without Halliburton most of the game. Ben Mathurin kept them in the game. He had 24 and 13 boards. TJ McConnell was doing TJ McConnell things to keep them in the game as well. And the funny thing is that the other Jalen Williams and Isaiah Joe didn't even play in this game. That's how deep OKC is. They're going to need to make some roster decisions, OKC, but they're still going to be the team to beat as long as those three are still on the team. And for Indiana, they're obviously next year now taking a step back, unless if they want to get a rental player for a year to cover for Halliburton, which isn't a bad idea. So it's going to be interesting for sure. And the East next year, the best three teams in the East as we stand right now are Cleveland, the Knicks, and Orlando. And then the Celtics are probably like 4th or 5th, even without Tatum. Because now with Halliburton being out, they're going to be like, hey, let's keep Jaylen Brown and try to get like a kind of a rental situation for Tatum or something. Somebody on and expiring, and then you get Tatum back next year. Kind of like the scenario I played with Indiana. opposed to tanking. And then Detroit's going to be better. Philadelphia, you think, is going to bounce back. Toronto has a lot of guys, but don't mesh together. Atlanta should be better. Could Washington be this year's Detroit potentially? Like, who could be this year's Detroit? The candidates are only Charlotte and Washington, because they've been the bottom feeders with Detroit before Detroit this year, obviously. But it's going to be interesting. And then the Bulls have a weird mix of guys that don't all mesh as well. And it's funny because remember at the time you were saying, speaking of the Bulls, they traded Caruso for Josh Giddey. The Thunder don't win the title without Caruso. At least this year. That trade long-term could end up being a win for the Bulls, but in the short term, it's a win for the Thunder because it was a big help to their championship. So, what do each team does next? Like, most likely to be traded on each team. The Thunder is probably Lou Dort. But again, they don't win the title without him. But they're going to have to make tough decisions. But Dort would make sense because then Cason Wallace steps into that spot. And Indiana's interesting. Do they turn into a tank without Halliburton, or do they get like a 1-year rental point guard per se and just try to be competitive in the East? So they, along with the Celtics, have big decisions to make there. And now if you're Cleveland and New York, don't make any trades. Just run back the same team because you have a better chance to make the finals with the team you currently have than you did. Although the Knicks have that case, they should have been there this year, because if that Halliburton shot doesn't go down in Game 1, they win that game in regulation, and they probably win a Game 7 at MSG, and they probably lose to OKC, though, in the finals in, 5 or 6, maybe. I don't think they get swept. They're too good to get swept, so I think that they probably lost in 5 or 6 to the Thunder. So, yeah, if you're New York and Cleveland, you bring it back. Don't trade anybody unless you absolutely have to for money reasons. Jared Allen, I think, is the most likely player on either team to be traded. People were saying Garland, because that was a worse loss than what the Knicks had. The Knicks had a fluke bounce loss and made them lose in overtime in Game 1 of that series. Although Cleveland, you could argue Game 2 is kind of fluky. But then again, they had all those injuries. But even when those guys were back, they got trounced on their home court in Game 5 against Indiana. So Cleveland's was probably worse than New York's on paper, because Cleveland was the 1 seed and lost in the second round, and New York was the 3 seed. And we're a win away from a Game 7 at MSG. So, to the West. The other big story in the NBA Finals, other than the Knicks' debacle of a coaching search, the Lakers were sold. The Buss family sold the Lakers to the guy that runs the Dodgers, which is huge for the NBA because now the Lakers are probably going to be run like how the Dodgers are run in baseball, Mark Walter. So, he's thinking big all the time. He signed Ohtani. The funny thing is that he passed on Judge a couple years ago. Now I'm talking about baseball here. But I think because he knew he wanted Ohtani, and I think Judge does have a little bit of a reputation around the league about how he was injury prone and people look at him as a one-trick pony, but that's not true. The injury prone part is kind of true, but But yeah, he signs Ohtani, but now the Lakers make the Luka trade, but that was before he got there. That's something Mark Walter would have done. But now Mark Walter's going to pay crazy money to Luka. And now, is he somebody that would keep an aging LeBron there? I don't know. I think he's one that thinks now, rather than living in the past. Like how the Buss family kind of did, obviously, with LeBron. Although LeBron's still good, he's not washed up. And he's better than Kevin Durant right now, who just got traded to the Rockets. We'll talk about that. But they did that with Kobe after his Achilles, and obviously that hamstrung them from a cap standpoint. But Mark Walter is not going to think like that. He thinks now, big picture, win now, with a little bit of the future in mind. So it's weird that the Lakers trade for Doncic before he buys the team. And that's something Mark Walter would have done. For sure. So that's kind of interesting. So the Rockets trade for Kevin Durant. They gave up a lot of second-round picks. They gave up the 10th pick in the draft, which is fine. I think that's a nice prize for the Suns, along with Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green will probably, one of them's probably going to be traded. If the Suns want to go rebuild, then you trade Dillon Brooks and keep Jalen Green. And maybe Jalen Green could be a nice backcourt mate with Devin Booker. We'll see how that fits. Maybe a change of scenery will help Jalen Green. But then again, he'll be playing with Devin Booker, which that's an interesting backcourt now in Phoenix. And then the Rockets obviously make the win now move for Durant. Their starting five is going to be Sengun, Durant, Fred VanVleet, either Tari Eason or Jabari Smith. And I'm missing somebody. They traded Brooks. But yeah, I'm drawing a blank on the two guards, but they traded Jalen Green. So now I'm absolutely going to cheat. Who am I missing in this starting lineup? Amen Thompson, who is the guy. People are pegging him as the guy for the Rockets. Who was, I think, the 4th pick in the draft in the Wemby draft. Which, that's a nice consolation prize for losing out on Wemby with the 4th pick. That's a real nice consolation prize. So, yeah, it'll be VanVleet, Thompson, Durant, Sengun, and Tari Eason or Jabari Smith in the starting five. Maybe Eason will be off the bench, and then they start Jabari Smith. But in that Warriors series, both guys are off the bench. But Eason plays more minutes, so they'll probably start Tari Eason in. Jabari Smith's another one that could be a trade bait somewhere. I'm surprised he wasn't in that Suns trade. He should have been in it. Which is weird. Maybe there could have been a third team in there that could have taken him. Or the Suns could have taken him and Jalen Green could have went to a third team. So yeah, I do think Jabari Smith is a trade bait guy. If you ask me, he's most likely to be traded on Houston and Tim. The Lakers, I would say Rui Hachimura. The Spurs, probably. So they missed out on Durant. I mean, will they go for Giannis? Will they go for somebody else? So it is interesting, for sure, where the Spurs could go with the trade. But yeah, Devin Castle's probably most likely traded. The Mavs probably Daniel Gafford. Memphis, JJJ. Now, I would have said JJJ before Bane. But yeah, they got a lot back for Bane. But yeah, Orlando really took advantage of the weaker East and made that move. So they're definitely in the top 3 in the East next year. Maybe if there's injuries for it. They would have been in the top 6 this year if they didn't have all those injuries, and Detroit would have been in the play-in. And Orlando to win the title after the Halliburton injury went from 30-1 to 12-1, which is wild. And they're right there at Cleveland and New York for me, among like the top 3 in the East. New Orleans most likely to be dealt. Maybe an injured DeJounte Murray, or maybe C.J. McCollum. Clippers, they were a dark horse for Durant. Most likely to be dealt on that team. That's a good one. Probably. That's a hard one. I'm going to look up NBA free agents. So this isn't sorted out by teams. So Clippers, free agents. Batum, Coffee. Ooh, Harden's a free agent. They're going to bring him back, you would think, right? Well, he has a player option. Harden has a player option. So that's interesting. Didn't realize that he had a player option. But yeah, I don't know who's most likely to be traded on the Clips. The Suns probably now Dillon Brooks. Sacramento, I would say, if they want to blow it up and rebuild, Sabonis. But if they kind of want a try for a different fit, I could see DeRozan being traded. But nobody of significance is going to be a free agent on the Kings. The Suns, they really don't have any. Portland, Matisse Thybulle's going to be a free agent with a player option, so that could be one. But they have a lot of assets. I wonder if they're going to try to ship somebody. But Jalen Williams, the big Jalen Williams, meaning the forward, restricted free agent. Spurs, Chris Paul's a free agent. That's a big deal. I wonder if Harrison Barnes is I wonder if that's a trade, guys. So LeBron has a player option. Kyrie player option. He'll be back. Harden player option. Miles Turner's the biggest name that's a UFA. So if the Pacers are a blow it up team, they have to they'll probably let him walk or maybe sign and trade. But if they want to bring it back and maybe get a stopgap for a year and try to be competitive, then you bring back Miles Turner. Josh Giddey is restricted. But the Bulls will match whoever. Julius Randle player option. Fred VanVleet team option. They're talking about an extension for him. Jonathan Kuminga is restricted. So the free agent class is so weak this year. Naz Reid player option. That's a big one. Cam Thomas restricted. Quentin Grimes restricted. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. John Collins player option. Santi Almada Aldama, restricted. Brooke Lopez, I think he's washed. Malik Beasley, 6th man of the year. He'll get overpaid by somebody in free agency. Bobby Porter's player option. Karis LeVert's a free agent. Ty Jerome's a free agent. If Cleveland loses him, that's a blow for their bench. Which they probably will lose him. He'll absolutely get overpaid by somebody. Chris Middleton, player option. Keon Ellis, team option. Dorian Finney-Smith, player option. He went to the Lakers in the Luka trade. Dennis Schroeder, free agent. So the Pistons have some big free agents they have to bring back. Gary Trent is a free agent. Clint Capella's finally a free agent. Onyeka Okongwu needs to be the starting center on the Hawks finally. Gershon Yazabelli from the Sixers. D'Angelo Russell. That's an interesting... If the Pacers want to, run it back and try to stay afloat for a year without Halliburton, I don't think D'Angelo Russell's a bad idea. And if it goes bad, then you and say if they're out of it by the All-Star break, then you trade them. Why not? Dairon Sharp's restricted, Davion Mitchell's restricted, and then Chris Paul. Luke Kennard, Tyus Jones, Kelly Oubre player option, Luke Cornett, who had the big game against the Knicks, Trey Jones, Russell Westbrook is just a big name rather than a player. Sam Morrell, Al Horford, he'll probably be on another team or maybe he'll go back to the Celtics. Bruce Brown's not bad. Tim Hardaway. So there are some names on here. This is a lot of role players, bench players that are free agents. So this is a good opportunity for a team like the Knicks or a team like Cleveland, which their weaknesses were their benches, to get their benches better. And I mean, Orlando's bench is not bad, but it took a hit with the Bane trade. But those are the weaknesses of those two teams. So those are opportunities for those guys to have a lot of 6 men. All right, let's talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. The Florida Panthers repeat as Stanley Cup champions. Congratulations to them. They just, I guess, underachieved in the regular season, and then they turned it up and won it. Kind of like the Blackhawks did that one year. They were the three seed in their own division, and then they end up winning the cup. That was the 2014-15 season. That was the year the Rangers won the Presidents and lost to the Lightning, and then the Blackhawks beat the Ducks in Game 7 that year. So, congrats to the Panthers. They do it again. And the addition of Brad Marchand, they don't win the cup without Brad Marchand. He's fantastic. And that was just a great trade for Florida. So, and then for the Oilers, another Stanley Cup run falls short of the ultimate goal, and now all eyes are on Connor McDavid. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2026. There's going to be trade rumors all summer and all year. Because if you're the Oilers, you can't lose him for nothing. You have to get this extension done. He is the best player in hockey. He is probably the best player in all of sports right now, if you ask me. It's either him or Patrick Mahomes. But it's probably McDavid, because Mahomes just got his ass kicked in the Super Bowl. So based on recency bias, the best player in all of sports right now is Connor McDavid. So you got to get that done. I mean, you can make a case it's Aaron Judge, and you could also make a case for Shohei Ohtani for best player in all sports. But it's Connor McDavid. And He took his team to the Stanley Cup Final 2 years in a row. And they could have easily won. They could have easily won the last 2 Stanley Cups. Easily. A couple games won to overtime. Florida, I know, won games. Oh, game 2 they won in overtime. If Edmonton wins that game, and Florida wins Game 6, forces Game 7. And then Game 7's back in Edmonton. So, you never know. Edmonton could have very well won the Cup if one of those overtime games gone differently. And then in 2024, so Game 1 was 3-0 Panthers, 4-1 Panthers. Game 2, Game 3 was 4-3 Panthers. That was a close game. And then the Oilers blew them out in Game 4. Beat him Game 5, blew him out again in Game 6, and then Game 7 was 2-1. So, Games 3 and Game 7, Edmonton could have won those games too. So, Edmonton could very well have been the 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Those 2 Stanley Cup finals between the Oilers and the Panthers were close. And McDavid obviously won the Conn Smythe in a losing effort last time, and I'm not a fan of losing player gets the Conn Smythe kind of thing. But to me, say if there was a significant injury, say if Leon Draisaitl was hurt last year and they did what they did, then that's a different story, because that's a player carrying his team to the moment kind of thing. Let's say Indiana loses to the Thunder and they have a couple injuries, and then you could tuck me in the Halliburton. The best one was LeBron in 2015. They lose Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. If that series goes 7, and say they lose to Golden State in 7, LeBron probably wins Finals MVP in a losing effort. Which there were people that voted for LeBron in a losing effort. And obviously, the Conn Smythe this year is Sam Bennett, which was deserving. So we talked about Edmonton, and they're going to be in the news all summer. I think that's a bigger deal than any NBA possibilities now that we had some of these injuries, which I think took Giannis off the table. And that's another team in the NBA I forgot to mention in terms of they have to be mentioned among the contenders. If the Bucks make a couple of nice moves, maybe they're in play with Giannis. So I think all eyes are on the NHL this summer. And I think the NHL, has more interest in terms of free agency and trades than the NBA. Because the NBA, we could still have some in the NBA, but I think it took a damper with Halliburton being hurt a little bit. Because I think that the Celtics would have blew up their team potentially, but now I don't think they are, because now they're going to think they have a chance. So I think the NBA offseason is going to be somewhat of a bust compared to the NHL, because we saw the Bane trade, we saw the Durant trade, and I don't think Giannis is getting moved now with Halliburton being hurt. So, NHL free agents. Mitch Marner's the top free agent. John Tavares is right there. So the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to look entirely different. We've been calling for that team to blow it up for years, and now they're not, because they believed that they had a chance. They could very well lose both of those guys. Nikolaj Ehlers from Winnipeg, that's a big one. Sam Bennett, who just won the Conn Smythe, Florida, I think, should retain him. Patrick Kane, Brock Besser, that's a big one. They can't lose him. That would be brutal if Vancouver lost him. Aaron Ekblad, people are talking about him, and people saying he's polarizing. I think Florida should retain him. Jonathan Drouin, Claude Giroux, who I don't think is the same player anymore. Mikael Granlund. That's another interesting free agent on Dallas. Brad Marchand, obviously, Florida's trade prize. He'll probably go somewhere else. Vladislav Gavrikov is another one that's an interesting free agent. I don't think that the Kings are going to retain him. Dante Fabro always had potential from Nashville. Pius Suter. The top free agent goalie is Jake Allen, who played on the Devils this past season. Ivan Provorov's a big one. Dmitry Orlov. Jamie Benn from Dallas. Andrei Kuzmenko, that's another interesting free agent from the Kings. So the Kings have some decisions. Evgeny Dadonov's a free agent. So there's some big names in hockey, but I think hockey offseason is more interesting because of McDavid. So Dallas has some decisions to make. Riley Smith, he was traded from the Rangers to Vegas. Connor Brown, Winnipeg. Jack Roslovic. A lot of Winnipeg guys are free agents. Obviously, Roslovic on the Panthers. Andrew Magnapape from the Capitals. He was a big part of their team. Matt Rizzo, Corey Perry, who's bounced around a lot. Brandon Saad, Christian Dvorak, Jeff Skinner, Anton Forsberg, Brandon Tanev, Ryan Lindgren. So it does get weak after Ekblad, but I think because of what could happen to Toronto, that's a big deal. And obviously McDavid is the other one to watch in terms of off season. So talk about teams and whatnot. So Toronto will probably take a step back. I don't think Winnipeg's going to be as good. I think the Capitals are going to take a step back. The Rangers did just trade Chris Kreider. I thought the return back was a little weak, and I think that's based off of how the Rangers and their fan base feel about Kreider compared to the rest of the league, which is somewhat unfortunate because I always liked Chris Kreider on the Rangers. He was a great playoff player for them and stuff, so they have to replace him in free agency. I wonder if the Rangers are a possible destination. If they make a couple more trades and clear cap space, or is that a Mitch Marner destination? Is that a Brock Besser? I think would be a better fit. And Nikolaj Ehlers, you would think that the Rangers might get one of those guys. The Devils should be better. They're getting Jack Hughes back. We'll see what their goalie situation is going to be. The Islanders got the number 1 pick in the draft. We'll see what happens with them. The Flyers acquired Trevor Zegras today from Anaheim. So they made themselves better. I'm thinking in the Metro Division. Carolina, we'll see. They obviously got Mikko Rantanen and then traded him to Dallas right after. But they're losing a lot of guys, so I don't know if their window is going to be open for that much longer. The Bruins were a huge disappointment this year. They should be better. Toronto's going to be worse. Florida might be worse without some of... If they lose some guys in free agency, they're going to be worse. So the Atlantic Division as a whole might be worse. I don't know about Ottawa. They're arrow pointing up. Montreal was better than I expected them to be. They are probably arrow up, especially if Toronto and Florida lose some guys. Tampa Bay is probably going to be the favorite in that division next year if Florida and Toronto lose some guys. Buffalo's Buffalo. When are they ever going to be good? Detroit's just mediocre. In the West, Anaheim just traded Trevor Zegras, but they get Chris Kreider, so they're making some moves. The Kings have some free agents that they have to worry about. Edmonton, obviously, the McDavid situation's hanging over them. Vegas is going to be better. Dallas has some free agent stuff, so we'll see with them. Colorado should be in the mix with Nate McKinnon. Winnipeg's probably going to be worse because Ehlers is a free agent. They have some other free agents that they might lose. St. Louis made a surprising playoff appearance this year and pushed the Jets to 7. So you would think they're going to be better, or maybe they might take a step back. Like, I think the Capitals might take a step back. And Alex Ovechkin's getting older. And I forgot to even mention the Penguins. They're going to not be good. I mean, they're already talking about not retaining Evgeny Malkin when his contract's up. So that might be a rebuild in Pittsburgh. And they have a new coach. And obviously the Rangers, of course we have to mention, they upgraded head coach and hired Mike Sullivan, who I think is going to be rejuvenated with a better team and a team that's come close to the Stanley Cup a couple times in the last couple of years. And back to the West, just talked about St. Louis, who they're a surprise this year. The Blackhawks, in theory, should be better with Bedard. Being a franchise guy, so you would think they're going to be better. So it's going to be an interesting offseason. Vancouver, they might lose Brock Besser, so they might be in a rebuild. We'll see about Utah and the Kraken. You would think both those teams are going to be better. Those two teams have some guys on paper, but they really didn't come in through fruition. And then Nashville was a huge disappointment this past year. And we'll see what they do. Maybe they actually realized that paying all those older guys was a mistake. Maybe they blow it up and rebuild. So that's an interesting one to watch as well. And then before we go into a quick look at the baseball standings right now. So the Yankees are in first in the American League East. Tampa Bay caught up to them. The Yankees are only 2.5 games up on the Rays. That's because the Yankees had a little bit of a swoon. They got swept by the Red Sox in Fenway. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Dodgers, and they lost 2 out of 3 to the Red Sox at home, and barely beat the Orioles 2 out of 3. And then they almost got swept by the Angels. Really, they could have gotten swept by the Angels, but they didn't. I think they won 7-3 on Thursday. They should have split with them because the one game was 1-0 Angels. Toronto's 4 back, Boston's 6 back, and then Baltimore might be a seller. There's already talk about them being a seller. Toronto, I think, is overachieved. Yeah, the Yankees are 3-7 in their last 10. Still have the most runs scored in the American League East, and still have given up the fewest runs in the American League East despite that slide. But their slide was because of their offense, not because of their pitching. Their pitching was good even in the slide. It was just the offense kind of crumbled, and they sat Judge one game, and then he kind of went in a slide. So good for the Rays to make it competitive in the AL East, even Toronto, even though Toronto's minus 10 run differentials, they're really not that good. The Rays are good. I think the Rays are good. Boston's good, but they made themselves worse after, again, sweeping the Yankees by trading Rafael Devers to the Giants. But maybe that's a Ewing theory. That could very well be a Ewing theory with Devers with the Red Sox. Just keep an eye on that. And then we'll see who Baltimore trades. We talked about some pitchers that they might trade at the deadline on the last podcast we had. Dean Kremer pitched well against the Yanks. All their guys pitched well against the Yanks except for Eflin. who I think is most likely to be traded on that team. But yeah, their pitching's really weak, Baltimore. So we'll see what they end up doing at the trade deadline. Detroit's in first in the Central, 49-30. They're really good. Plus 82 run differential. And then all the other teams have negative run differentials. Cleveland, KC, Minnesota, and obviously the White Sox. Obviously all those teams have underachieved this season. I mean, Cleveland, you can make cases overachieved. Minus 20 run differential to over 500. But KC is a big disappointment this year. Because Bobby Witt Jr. was the favorite for the AL MVP this year, not Aaron Judge, which is crazy. And then people were picking Gunnar Henderson on Baltimore. Houston's in first in the AL West, 5 up on Seattle. Plus 46 run differential, so they've turned their season around, although their offense has kind of stunk all year, but it's getting better. Seattle, let's talk about Cal Raleigh. He's the sole reason why the Mariners are over 500. He has 30 home runs. He has been amazing this year. So this season, 31 home runs, 66 RBIs. Which is crazy. Hitting 276. And they're 5 back at Houston. They were in first place for a while, Seattle, but Houston's took over. Texas is underachieved. They're plus 16 run differential. They're 2 games under 500. They should be better. They should be the second best team in that division from a standing standpoint. I think they'll pass Seattle. The Angels have overachieved. They're 37-40. They're minus 54. They won 3 out of 4 against the Yankees. And Taylor Ward's been very good for them from a power standpoint. And Mike Trout really hasn't been Mike Trout. 227, 12 homers, 28 RBI. Was he hurt for a while? I think he was. That's weird that he's not doing good. And the Athletics, the Sacramento Athletics, 32-48, minus 127 run differential. So they have a worse run differential than the White Sox. That's only because the White Sox pitching hasn't been a complete disaster. It's their offense that has. And Athletics pitching's been a disaster. NL East, the Phillies are in first. They passed the Mets. They're 47-31. They're plus 41 run differential. 8-2 in their last 10. They're playing up to par. The Mets, 46-32. 2-8 in their last 10. Them and the Yankees have had some rough patches. But I think because they've had the rough patches at the same time, the criticism has been at both of them rather than one of them. Because if it was one of them in a slump, they'd be taking all the shit. But they've been sharing the shit. It's been 50-50 because obviously the Mets getting Juan Soto, and Juan Soto's underachieved so far. Atlanta's in third. They're under 500, but they are plus 25 runs differential, 7-3 in their last 10. So they're getting it together with Acuna back, and they're going to get Spencer Strider back eventually. Or no, he is back. My bad. I thought he wasn't back yet, so he is back. But he's getting back, I should say. And then the Nats are 32-46, minus 73 run differential, 2-8 in their last 10. The Marlins, 6-4 in their last 10, 31-45. So they're tied with the Nats in the standings. They're at their minus 90. Cubs are in first in the NL Central 46-31, plus 96. They're 5-5 in their last 10 though. Lead the league in runs scored. Their pitching hasn't been that great. Milwaukee's in second, 43-35, 3.5 back of the Cubs. They're 7-3 in the last 10, winners of 4 straight. St. Louis 42-36. They've been a surprise. Plus 34 run differential, 6-4 in the last 10. Reds are 40-38, plus 34 run differential, 5-5 in the last 10. Pittsburgh 31-48, 3-7 in the last 10. They're talking about Paul Skeens as a trade guy. If I'm Pittsburgh, you keep him. But then again, the argument is when are you going to be good? Well, keep him because he's an asset. And you'll have, if you want to trade him in winter, trade him in winter because you'll have more bidders. Dodgers 48-31, first place in the NL West, so they have overpassed the Giants. 7-3 in their last 10. They're playing like the best team in baseball. They lead the league in runs scored, 442 runs. And I thought it was the Cubs. It's actually the Dodgers that lead the league in runs scored. And then San Francisco Giants 44-34 on the year, plus 46 run differential, 4-6 in the last 10 though. San Diego 42-35. Plus 25 run differential, 4-6 in the last 10. Arizona's over 500 at 39-38. They're minus 3 run differential there, so they're getting there. 6-4 in the last 10, and Colorado's a joke. Minus 202 run differential. They're this year's White Sox. They're 18-60. So we're obviously going to do a couple more shows before the trade deadline in baseball, and who could be on the move. I mean, the Orioles, I think all eyes are on them. Devers was dealt, so that was the big one so far, and I think he'll be good on the Giants. He'll, I think, be better in a change of scenery, and maybe the Red Sox, that's a Ewing theory situation, so we got to keep our eyes on that. All right, so fun show today. We'll record again maybe on Wednesday before the NBA draft, if not tomorrow. So hope you guys have a great day, everyone.